is a 5-minute business builder with Rick Howe, where your business comes first on News 95.7.
Well, every now and again, we invite members of the local business community to join us to give us an update on how things are going. And with us here this afternoon is Senior Mortgage Advisor Clinton Wilkins. Good afternoon, Clinton.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
How you doing today,
I'm
sir?
doing just great.
Good.
It's Thursday. Great day.
It is indeed. I saw you on the TV news the other night talking about the ongoing delays, I guess, with the bridge work over the Macdonald Bridge and some of the impact.
Yeah, and it definitely impacts us because we're directly beside the Macdonald Bridge, and we kind of use that as a landmark. People ask where our office is, and we say that's at 99 Wise Road, right beside the Macdonald Bridge. So we definitely lived through some of the closures in the past, and, you know, they're definitely going back to the table and doing some more now.
Yep.
And we take our last clients in at 6 o'clock because we really think that having that flexibility in terms of scheduling is important.
Sure.
But with a bridge closure at 7, that means we really need to get them out at like 6:30, 6:45. Otherwise, it can be a long commute home.
Yeah. But again, it's just a temporary thing.
It's just temporary, and hopefully it will be all done, and then life will be good, and we'll continue along.
Yes, indeed. But you're here today not to talk about the bridge work, but to talk about the home buying process.
And I think the process is so important, Rick.
Yeah,
You've bought homes, I bought homes, and I think if you haven't gone through the process before, it sometimes can be daunting. It's the biggest purchase of people's lives.
Yeah.
And, you know, homeownership is part of the Canadian dream, and I think that it's very realistic here in Halifax. We've talked about that before. And I think just going through the process and knowing what the different steps are and who to have on your team is just so important.
Do you need a lawyer?
Every purchase transaction requires a lawyer in the province of Nova Scotia. And actually in every province across the country, a lawyer is required to register the deed, and in our case, register the mortgage charge when it's a purchase.
Even a private sale?
Even a private sale. In private sale, you need a lawyer even more than you do on a regular MLS-listed property.
Yeah, why?
Because in a private sale, the lawyer would draft up the purchase agreement to make sure that it's good and binding.
Okay.
And that's required to obtain mortgage financing.
All right.
So a lawyer, super important. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, real estate law is very transactional. But when it's the biggest purchase of your life, you want to make sure you're protected.
And you're right. It is daunting. We're into our second home now. We bought an initial home. And thankfully, my wife carried the weight because I was just kind of lost. I mean, with the paperwork, with the things you got to know.
You showed up and signed the paperwork,
yeah, pretty
right?
much,
But there needs to be some champion driving that process.
Yeah. And so tell me about that process. Again, it may be daunting, but you know, when push comes to shove, it's got people like yourself who are out there lending a hand here.
And we love holding the hands of consumers. And I think especially when you're a first-time home buyer, you need to have an advocate that's going to be in your corner to make sure that you are protected and the transaction goes smooth and you're getting the best deal. And I really think the very first step is getting a pre-approval, and that's where we come into play.
Okay, tell me, what is a pre-approval?
A pre-approval takes into account two things. It's a pre-qualification and it's a rate hold. So when we do a pre-qualification, we look at your income, your assets, and your credit. And as long as all of that's copacetic, we figure out what you can afford and how much money you're going to need to get into your new home.
Yep.
And then we submit the file to a lender to get a rate hold. The rate holds are typically good for 120 days. So that's 4 months. So you can come in and get a pre-approval today with a closing as far as December. When we don't hear from a client or if they don't make an offer in the first 120 days, we reach back out and we can refresh that pre-approval and we see if anything's changed with them in terms of their income, assets, or credit, and then we can do another rate hold. I think it's so important because if you're going out and you're shopping for a new home, you need to know what you need to afford, or what you can afford, and what's the most you can afford if that's really where you want to be. And you need to know how much cash you need to have in hand. And I think going through that process is definitely the very first step when you're looking at buying a new home.
What's the required down payment?
The minimum down payment in Canada is 5%. And any down payment below 20% requires the insurance of either the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Genworth, or Canada Guarantee.
Okay.
It's considered high ratio insurance, and it's really insurance to protect the bank against you. So if the bank were to incur a loss, the insurance company would then step in and cover the loss for the lender. If you put down 20% or more, you can get what we consider a conventional mortgage. So that's something that the insurance would not be involved with. And typically when you get a conventional mortgage, it's very common that an appraisal is required to confirm the market value of the property because the bank wants to make sure that their asset can support the loan.
We know that in the past, and especially in the U.S., there's been troubles with people, again, perhaps getting in over their heads, buying more expensive homes than they should have, and then mortgage rates start to impact, and, then they're in a heap of trouble here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in Canada, we're very conservative. There's been a lot of noise in the media around the stress test. We qualify clients at a higher rate than what their actual contract is. So right now, a good 5-year fixed rate, for example, is approximately 2.69%. There's a little higher sometimes and a little lower, but around 2.69. We're qualifying clients on a rate of 5.19 to make sure that they can afford their mortgage payment based on that 5.19% interest rate. So then if the rates do go up, we know that they can withstand that payment.
And do we lock in a rate, or do we go with a variable kind of floating rate?
I love variable, and I talk about variable all the time. About 60% of my clients are in a variable, which is higher than the average.
What's the advantage to that?
The big pros on the variable is historically it's been lower than the fixed. Right now we're in a little bit of a weird situation. The best variable rate on a insured purchase today is approximately 2.95, so it's higher than the fixed rate.
Okay.
But the economists are projecting that the prime rate's going to go down. So the Bank of Canada is actually meeting September 4th, the Wednesday, and some of the economists are projecting that the Bank of Canada is going to reduce the overnight rate, which is going to, lower that prime rate, which is going to be great for consumers that are in a variable rate mortgage or have a secured line of credit or have any debt products that are connected to that prime rate. And the economists are also saying that it may even get reduced a couple more times over the next year or so. So I think that a variable is still a great option. The other real big pro on a variable is if you're going to break your term early, it's always only 3 months interest to get out.
Yeah.
So, a lot of things change in people's lives. They get married, they have children, sometimes they go through divorces, there's health issues. I think having a variable is the most secure solution because it can almost prepare you for those rate increases if they were to happen.
Yeah.
Plus, it'll have the lowest cost of exit if you need to break your term early.
But as you pointed out, there's a but there, and that is if
there's always a but.
Increase
Exactly.
in rates, yeah.
And we've been in an increasing prime environment over the last 2 years. So the clients that took a variable, they're paying more today than they were 2 years ago. July of 2017 was the first rate increase. But overall, historically, variable is better.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll be with Todd on Saturday to answer questions?
I'll be here with Todd on Saturday at 10 a.m. We'll certainly talk more about the buying process. We'll talk about your needs for having a licensed real estate professional, and certainly call in and ask us any questions. We'd love to answer them live on the air.
All right. He is Senior Mortgage Advisor Clinton Wilkins, and thank you for dropping by again here, Clinton.
Thanks for having me.
The News 95.7 5-Minute Business Builder with Rick Howe, where success matters.